Welcome to Florida Focus, a college football podcast. My name is Brandon. I am a lifetime Florida State Seminole fan. And once again, I am joined by Lynn, a lifetime Florida State fan as well. So, Lynn, thank you for being on the show. And man, week 6 was quite an interesting weekend, and especially for the state of Florida, very victorious in most parts, except all but one.
And oddly enough, that one was not Miami.
Correct. You can't lose when you're not on the field. So, good for the Canes to come out without a loss. But, so we're going to recap all the college football games around the state. We'll talk a little bit about the easy win for the Gators in the Swamp versus Towson. Florida State is victorious at home versus NC State. And we'll whip around the rest of the state of Florida to see how everyone else did. So let's go ahead and dive right in, Lynn.
Florida was a little bit shocking for me. I learned that Joe Flacco's son is quarterback at Towson this week. Had no idea there was that connection there, and was happy to see what the Gators did without Felipe Franks.
Yes, and so, Trask steps in, and that was kind of an interesting tie-in. Actually, I don't think I even caught that. To see that Trask has pretty much kind of seamlessly transitioned into the right role. And that's coming at the right time for the Gators because they have a monstrous schedule coming up the next month. And so it's good that they had a little bit of a buffer. He comes in against Kentucky, plays well against a pretty bad Tennessee team, does what he should do against Towson. It really seems to me like Emory Jones could help the running game, but Trask seems to be handling the starting job really well, and that's kind of what Dan Mullen kind of needs is right now until he gets all his recruits in, a game manager, and he seems to have that between Jones and Trask.
Which is always important, especially in Florida, because everybody that is in the SEC has so many different styles of offenses. It's good to have the diversity there. And then just playing your other Florida teams, you can surprise them with players who are like that, being able to stop certain plays, who are able to run all over defenses. It's just good to see.
I agree. So I'll throw out some positive I saw from the Gators this week. First time since 2012, I think that's 7 years, that the Gators have had 2 shutouts in a season. So even against bad opponents, it is hard to stop a team from scoring at all. They were kind of helped out with that a little bit, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Trask does break Chris Leak's consecutive completions record in this game. So from last week into this week, he had 18 straight completions. So that's a new Florida Gator school record. You really start to see Pierce look like a better option at running back and even get some tight end involvement. Kyle Pitts gets 2 touchdowns in this game, his second and third on the year. So perhaps he can become a good weapon on the offense going forward. Jeremiah Moon earns SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week. So quite a game on his end. But what are some other things you saw from the Gators that were positive going forward?
I have to agree with you on the tight end. I feel like I haven't seen a lot of plays this season from any teams with the tight end position, in terms of, offense. Sounds really weird to me to even say, but, the tight end is a diverse position. So to see them have a tight end who really stepped it up this week and did score, it is a good thing in my opinion, because like I said, I haven't seen a lot of that recently.
For sure. And I think around the state, probably Harrison Bryant of Florida Atlantic is the best tight end in the state of Florida. But you certainly have Trey McKitty of Florida State. And I'm not as familiar with Dan Mullen's offense, but there's just a lot more offenses that are going, faster tempo or, spread things. That's not quite what Mullen runs, but just not as much use for a tight end. You need a pure running back that can get you some downhill yards. So,
right.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, and I will also point out, I know that we still have a long way to go this season, but based off of last year and, the first 4 games so far, 5 games, it's hard to believe we're already.
I know, right? Yeah.
So yeah, for almost a season and a half now, I think Dan Mullen finally found his fit with Florida. And I know that some people are going to say that that's way too soon to say. And, people have a hard time, even with winning coaches, committing to more than 2 years because everything can collapse so easy. But I think Florida was the best fit for Mullen, especially after seeing how, and I hate to use this word, but mediocre he was at Mississippi State and getting things going there. The fact that he came here, and even without his own recruits really being on the team, last year and this year, he's truly worked wonders there, and I think it's exactly what they needed. And, as a Florida State fan, I hate to say it, but I think that was a really good hire, and I think there's a lot of buy-in that team and the fan base can get.
Sure. And I think probably, I would say, in my opinion, the better way to phrase his mediocrity is how he fell and left with Mississippi State, because they fell at the end. I mean, he did have Dak Prescott, and they were, fun trivia fact, they were the first number 1 team in the college football playoff ranking ever, but they fell quickly after that. So he did have some moments of success, and he played Bama well. I don't think he ever beat him, though. And it just, long term, I mean, he stayed there for a long time, and he provided a lot of stability that program probably needed. But the Gator fan base was split on, should we take him back? And, is he going to be the right coach for the job? It turns out it was almost a perfect hire, and Florida actually beats Towson very handily, and they get their 9th consecutive victory dating back to last season. So I did want to add a couple of things that probably the Gators can work on moving forward. The run game still seems to be struggling a bit, and although we mentioned they shut out Towson in this game, they were helped out by some mistakes by Towson, the Tigers, and that was because that Towson fumbled in the red zone and did miss 2 field goals. But first half, not a very good defensive effort. I think it was 17-0 going in the locker room.
Sounds about right.
Until the adjustments were made, a running quarterback just didn't seem to be successful. So, if you want to bust that out against better SEC teams, just something to work on looking forward. But not a lot of negatives coming out of this. You shut someone out, you beat them handily. You kind of move forward and just count the W and move on to a tougher opponent.
Yep.
That'll pretty much wrap up the Gator victory. We'll talk about their next week's matchup at home, which is a big one, momentarily. But any last thoughts on the Gators before we move on to Florida State?
I think they just need to keep riding this Mullen train and, work out the kinks like you pointed out with the running game. But everything else seems to be falling into place still. So just keep riding the wave as long as you can.
Well said. All right. So Gators win comfortably at home. Florida State has a pretty big victory against NC State at home. They win 31-13. So, Lynn, you actually had the pleasure of attending this game, and certainly a lot of things, but overall impression of what the atmosphere was like, and coming into this game, what Florida State expected. How did they perform in that atmosphere?
I would like to first point off the huge difference between having a day game at Doak in September with 100-degree weather versus having a night game in 87-degree weather. As a fan, I felt the difference, and I'm sure that both teams on the field felt the difference. So I think that might have had a little bit to do here. I'm not going to say that the weather is the only reason why, but I think it certainly helped. Being in the stands, I know that a lot of our concern recently has been getting the fans into the seats. It was family weekend, so we had about 60,000 in the stands this week compared to the 42, I believe, that we had the prior week against Louisville. Yeah. So I think that the fans being there for the team also really helped everything fall into place for us. I was concerned. I know that I talked about this in a preseason podcast with you. I was concerned about this game because NC State is always a 50-50 chance that we are going to lose. But I was really impressed. And one thing I keep telling myself is, as long as I see improvements with this team week over week, Florida State is going to get to where we should be as a team and as a program. Our defense exposed Bailey Hawkman for the quarterback that he is. And it helped explain why Willie Taggart decided he would not win the quarterback battle last year, which led to his transfer to NC State. Yeah. Going into this game, it's my understanding there's a 3-way quarterback competition. And, Hockman went out injured towards the end of the game. And they started Leary, who had a really strong showing at quarterback. And that's where our defense really started to struggle in the game, was because, Hockman goes out, Leary comes in, and, he was making really accurate passes. We were having a hard time with our zone defense, getting him, shut down to his receivers, that type of thing. This game also exposed a lot of the continuing O-line issues, especially at center. I don't know if we're really struggling to recruit centers right now, but we can definitely tell, not just this game, but all season, we've had some really bad snaps going, over our heads, slipping through the quarterback's fingers. Luckily, Hockman was able to recover a lot of those, so not many people truly noticed what was going on there, but that's my big concern right now. But also, the several collapses we had in the pocket towards the end of the game. Love James Blackman. However, I'm kind of really becoming a big Hornibrook fan. He's doing a good job spreading the ball between all of the receivers. And I believe that Bud Elliott shared the stat that we had 8 receivers, and they each caught about 10 passes each. I might have those two numbers mixed up, but everybody had a fair chance at receiving. Everybody was making plays and had really good eye on the field, making sure that he wasn't necessarily throwing into players who were overcovered at any given moment. So I think that's a really good move for Florida State as well, because I know that we've had a lot of interceptions earlier in the season, a lot of interceptions last year, just because we couldn't give the quarterback the coverage needed to find the open receiver. Cam Akers, I know that I also mentioned in the earlier podcast, I wasn't completely sold on Akers because he had a bad season last year, and bad in my eyes, not bad in terms of most other people's. But he had a lot of convincing for me, and I'm sold.
Right.
He had a really good game, and it was announced, I want to say at the end of the third quarter, and I know I sent you a photo of this, but he passed Devontae Freeman and Anton Smith for 9th all-time Florida State career rushing yards during the game. So I think last season and what I saw was a fluke compared to the prior season and what I'm seeing now. He's back on it, and I think that that's going to really come into play as we finish out the rest of our schedule. The only other thing that I can really think of at this point in time is the ACC officials have a special targeting rule that is only for Florida State players.
I was going to bring that up too. Go ahead.
Because from the stands, I think we had 2 calls. In the replay for both of them, they didn't show them in the stands, so I was having to text people who were watching it on TV to say, what the heck is going on right now? Amongst other things going on with the officials. We just had a bad night with our officiating crew. But for the last easily 3 years, I've had to question what the technical targeting rule in the NCAA is, because we will have a player hit the quarterback or whoever's shoulder, and suddenly that's a targeting call. But when the same thing happens to us, nobody gets calls, nobody gets penalized. So as a Florida State fan, there was one play where I thought they were going to call it, and they didn't. And then they called it on 2 when one of them was overturned. I've seen a lot of reaction on Twitter regarding the first call that was made where we had the player ejected, and I, for the life of me, can't remember who that was.
It was Janarius Robinson.
Yeah. Everybody is hoping that the ACC will review the play, and allow Robinson to start against Clemson, because right now he's going to be out for the first half of that game based on the targeting call.
Yeah, that was a great overall impression. So I had a couple of thoughts, and real quickly, you were talking about the receivers for the game. There were 10 guys that each had at least 2 touches. So thank you for that, and I'll expand on probably a lot of those points you said. A lot of the positives that I saw from the Noles, obviously you come away with a 31-13 victory against a division rival at home. Always going to be happy about that. A lot of 3-and-outs. This was something our defense just was not stopping teams on up to this point this season. And I don't know, I counted, I think, at least 3 or maybe 4. So good for us. We had a tackle for loss early in the game by Levante Taylor, who did leave injured later in the game. We'll see what his status is for Clemson. There were some blitzes that were called on third down to help force, some pressure, help force a bad throw. And we're just rotating in a lot of new guys on defense. This was something, I don't know if you were going to say lack of experience in some positions, or you just have the talent and the 5 stars, like Akeem Dent, who's sitting on the bench. You just want to get him involved. I was really glad to see some rotation there. Fagan recovers a fumble in the second quarter. Lots of pass breakups. We really, really owned the receivers in this game. Especially, I think it's pronounced Imizzi, the main guy from NC State. We really kind of shut him down. He did get a touchdown late in the game when it didn't really matter, and they only cut it to like a 13-point lead or something, but it was 24-13 at that point. Defense stood tall. We had first and goal, NC State, and we stopped them to a field goal. We did stop them on 4th and 1. On offense, I mean, it sounds weird to say, but we slowed the tempo down. I know it's kind of a weird thing, and that's probably why we had a lot of struggles on the offensive line with a lot of illegal procedures, with a hold here and there, and gave up so many sacks. But it increased our time of possession. Not that time of possession really matters for winning games. I think Florida State, they said, was last in the country, and you're 3-2. UCF, obviously, with their win streak and just, one recent loss, they just don't have time of possession. They don't care. Why should they? They score quickly, and they put the pressure on you. So that was an interesting kind of game plan with this one, and I really kind of surprised Bryles kind of decided to give into that game plan with Taggart, but trust me, it does make a lot of sense. I get why you don't want to, because then you expose your guys to a lot of stuff. It does happen.
Right.
But there was a lot of things, and I have to kind of agree with you with Hornerbrook. I'm not totally sold. He just complete like a pass to Gavin while he's being wrapped up. He makes a lot of throws that maybe, I don't know, a lot is a heavy term. He makes some throws that Blackman probably doesn't. We talked about it last week where there was a play against Louisville where Terry streaking down the sideline, wide open, catches it for a touchdown. That same exact play was called against Virginia, and Blackman overthrew him. So that would have actually tied the game late. And you do have to consider those kinds of things, but they did target Tamarian Terry a lot more this time. I think last week he only had 2 catches, and he actually fumbled one of those, which he recovered pretty quickly. And, I love the emergence of Keyshawn Helton. Keep targeting Terry, especially when you're in positive territory. Ontario Wilson gets his first touchdown of the season, and, man, these guys are just really starting to catch fire. And I'll be honest, I'm starting to lose track of names. I'm like, how many guys are catching passes? It's tough. So
well, and there's some names that we haven't heard in a while. I feel like aside from catching returns, we haven't heard a lot about DJ Matthews in the last couple of weeks. And his name was called plenty of times over the loudspeaker. And going back to what you were saying about Terry, there's a reason why we call him Scary Terry. It's because he can do some of the things that the other receivers can't and make those crazy plays like that. So it's a nice change.
It is. And, it's really good to see that distribution. They even gave DJ Matthews like a reverse option look, and all day. That guy can get as many touches as he wants. Him and Akers, at least, Akers, you got to get at least 20. I think they were saying the goal is to get him 25. Kind of worried about the workload at that point.
Right.
But 20 plus, you're in pretty good range, and DJ, including special teams, he needs at least 10.
Another good thing that I completely forgot until just now to come out of this week is, of the 5 stars given around the ACC, Florida State took 3 of them. So I think considering how our program's been and the concern coming from a lot of the boosters and fans, I think that that's a step in the right direction that, it's not just us who are starting to see some of these changes and the players and the development. This game was so stand out and so convincing that even the ACC is like, no, these guys are being recognized. So that was nice to wake up to on Sunday, seeing that news.
Nice. And then I one more quick special teams positive that I had. We downed a punt inside the 5. We had Helton had that 50-yard kickoff return to start the second half, and time to emerge with a new kicker. Going to give Grothow some chance here. He did get an extra point late in the game, and maybe time to turn over the reins. We'll see. But that's all I kind of had for the positives. What were some things you noticed that Florida State can kind of work on going forward into the bye week and then continuing ACC play and then the mighty Clemson out of the bye week too?
I know that one thing it's very difficult. Let me preface. It's very difficult for me to see the exact plays that are about to happen. That's always been my biggest struggle as a football fan. I've literally been watching football easily for the last 25 years. So when the players line up before the play starts, I cannot tell you what play is being called for anything. I can tell you this season, our zone defense is struggling. So the fact that I, who can't tell you anything that's about to happen, can see that the zone defense is struggling is telling you something. I think that we're starting to recover that really well. We just have to get those zones a little more well worked, if you will. I know that there are a lot of bad things that have come out. That's my biggest takeaway for the defense. I don't know if you've seen the reports, but I know that Taggart has opened up a kicking competition. This week was not a good example for it because we only had I think we had one field goal and then just a couple of, point after kicks. But he did say that going into the bye week and coming up with Clemson, we could see some change on the field, and it might be Aguayo, it might be other players.
I don't think you have a choice at this point. Aguayo's missed 4 of his last 5, and that cost us 9 points against Louisville. You really kind of have to.
Right. But again, it goes back to that O-line. Our pocket collapsed more times than I can count. And again, our center really needs to step up. We could have easily avoided at least one of I believe they had 2 sacks on Hornibrook, 2 or 3. I know that we could have at least avoided one when literally the O-line, the play starts, we snap the ball, and the O-line literally just stood there. They didn't defend him at all. And everybody that was seated near me was like, why are we not protecting our quarterback right now? And then a couple of plays later, he wasn't sacked, but the pocket had collapsed so much that Hornibrook ran past 2 of his defensemen before they realized, we should be doing something here. And luckily he got, a couple of yards off of the play running the ball, but they're completely oblivious to what's happening around them. And even though there have been improvements this season over last season, we still have a really long way to go with them. They're obviously not following the plays. They're not paying attention to the needs of the quarterback to the full extent.
Yeah, it's pretty clear they want to move fast tempo. When they have to slow down, you start to see some glaring opportunities. And, alongside the offensive line, a lot of this, we had illegal formations. I counted 3, I believe, just in the first half. And, I think, honestly, just a lot of small things to clean up. Hornibrook did have an early miscommunication with Tamar and Terry. Was it a streak or was it a go route where you come back? And so that cost us a drive, you had to punt it away. Total of 8 sacks. Obviously, you have to clean that up. And it's really, to me, what a sack means. Because I'm counting 8 total, The only time out of those 8 sacks that we actually continued the drive was one. We took a sack at our own 7. Then we took a sack at our own 12. Hornbook even fumbled it. We had to punt. Took a sack at our own 20. Had to punt. Sack at his own 20. Had to punt. We actually drove, and then late in the drive, took a sack at the NC State 25, and then took a sack on the very next play, and then we missed a field goal. And then took a sack at the NC State 30 and 37. Actually, that's 0 for 8. Pardon me. We actually didn't advance the drive at all when we took a sack. So it just kills all your momentum. And this is probably ticky-tack, but you probably noticed this, Lynn. There were 5 or 6 times, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 or 6 times a defensive back should have intercepted the ball and didn't. I mean, just dropping interceptions was crazy. It was driving me nuts.
I did notice that, and the only reason why I didn't comment was because we blocked the pass. And while I would have loved to have, picked the ball there for all of those times, and from where I was seated, 23 and 24, I think, on our defense were the 2 who had the most opportunities. And you could tell that they were disappointed in themselves after the play, not just because of, the shaking of fists and throwing them on the ground and throwing their little tantrum, but as they would walk off the field, their heads were literally hanging low in disappointment that they weren't able to intercept there. But I would much rather have us block the play in that circumstance than have us tip the ball to the intended receiver or, lead to what could become a fumble and not recover it. So
yeah,
it's a risky line, and I get that. And again, I would have loved to see us capitalize more off of those plays. But they stopped the ball from working for NC State, and in my mind, that was a win.
Yeah, and you could say it's an opportunity where they could make the play, or you can say it's a positive where they had a pass breakup. But you had Akeem Dent who dropped one. Fagan also had one as well. Samuels Jr. He had 1 or 2 pass breakups. One of them, maybe could have made a play on, but I'm not too worked up about it. But I was like, well, there are some chances. Maybe you pick at least one of those off going forward. To round it off, another opportunity. We had an 18-yard punt. That's going to happen with a freshman punter. That's fine, but that came at a really early juncture in the game. Harrison did drop a pass. Again, with that, you throw the ball so much. I think Hornbook threw 36 passes, something crazy. It's you're going to drop some. It's just the nature of the game. So just like when you run Cam Akers that many times, he's going to have negative yards, which he still didn't even end up with 90 on the game. And if you don't even count the 41-yard scamper in the fourth quarter, he didn't even break 50 yards. So credit to NC State's defense for stopping him. Their game plan was clearly stop Cam Akers. They said, you can let every wide receiver catch a pass, and that's literally what happened. But we're not going to let Cam get loose. So just some things there. Coming out of the locker room, you start off the second half with a 3 and out. DJ Matthews also dropped a pass. And, yeah, the penalties. I welcome any ACC official on this show to kind of explain some of the rules. I'm not going to bash the refs or anything. I understand they have a hard job. A lot of it's bang bang. At least with the Hockman one, I can kind of see it because the helmet was coming off, but that to me is an equipment malfunction. And they're on the field. They're right there. They're just seeing the quick reaction and the equipment and the snap of the neck. That's what they're looking for. I understand. But after plenty of review, I think you have plenty enough to show that that's not quite what you're looking for and trying to avoid with penalties. And a little bit concerning there. It just got ridiculous in the last few minutes, just excessive flags. But overall, I was very happy with Florida State's performance. They come out with a 31-13 victory. They win at home. I can't even remember last time we held a point to 13 points, and so it's a good relief to know we can actually do that again. All right. So the Noles victorious. They advanced to 3-2 at home. Any last thoughts before we move on to the rest of the schools?
I think we covered everything pretty well. I do want to give a shout out to Gene Deckerhoff. That game with NC State was his 500th game calling. And they also put up his stats in recognition. He has been our the voice of the Seminoles for 40 years. He started in 1979. He has announced 2,065 touchdown FSU. He spent 30,000 minutes in the booth. He has called 5 national championship games, and he is in the Florida State and Florida Sports Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Gene on that historic landmark. I'm sure he's got many, many more years ahead as the voice of the Noles. And for those of you who may not be Nole fans but know who Gene Deckerhoff is, and for those of you who don't, he is also the voice of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That's correct. So yeah, kudos to him. Some final thoughts on my end. I think the ACC network's catching on, and I love the availability of games. But they have a couple things to smooth out. I'll still give them a B+ on their coverage right now, and they got some really good talent with like Mark Richt and EJ Manuel. But they did get a couple of things wrong. I just want to say, I'm not mad, guys. Let's get it corrected going forward. You announced that Blackman was starting this game. Obviously, some wrong intel there. They called our defensive coordinator Harlan Barrett, not Harlan Barnett. And, I think that if you had a little more research on this, you would know that Bailey Hockman did transfer from Florida State to NC State, and you would have kind of played that up a little bit, make it a little more dramatic. But other than that, I think he did a pretty good job. And again, with the targeting call, I would love to know how you can actually review a play that initially wasn't called targeting. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to go any more in depth with this. I'm not going to go like the refs stink or anything. We're playing the ACC. We know how it works. It just is what it is. So, but yeah, Florida State victorious at home, 31-13. And most Nole fans will rejoice, and they move on to 3-2 and take a week off. So good for everyone there. So Lynn, you mentioned Miami didn't lose. Why is that?
Miami had a bye week this week.
So there we go. A little bit of Miami hate this week. I don't have Chris to taper me off. And not that he's a huge fan of Miami, but if you're Miami, what do you look at going forward the rest of the season? What do you hope to build on, and what can you improve upon?
Well, I know that one of the big concerns with their offense is quarterback play. I think Manny Diaz really needs to, coming off of the bye week, I hope he spent this last week looking at his talent there, seeing who really is best fit for that job. I know that Perry obviously wasn't the best fit going into season. Maybe you do need to start, your freshman quarterback in this case. Who knows? I think that they really need to step up their defense as well. I really think once Manny can get that quarterback decision down, he'll see a lot more of the team pull together, because quarterback is your leader, and there's nobody really taking the reins in that position this year so far.
Yeah, and I think Williams is probably the least of all evils to be kind there, honestly, because that's been such a struggle. But more than that, the offensive line, you start off the year with 10 sacks against the Gators, and they just really haven't looked the same since. You squeak out a 17-12 win against Central Michigan. You struggle in everybody except your Division II opponent, which is Bethune-Cookman. You lose to North Carolina on the road, and you have a lot of questions going forward. And this is a very different Miami team than we expected. You expected Dallas to kind of come out and contribute more. We did see N'Kosi Perry come again against Bethune, so we have the Perry sighting. But Tay Martell, who you bring in as a grad transfer, doesn't even play a down at quarterback, and that's fine, because UCF has the same approach with Wimbush, except they started in one game, and we'll talk about him in a second. But that's all right. You tell a guy coming in like that, it's a competition, and it goes to the best player. And they've been a football guy their whole life. It's fine. So if I'm Miami, I try and get that nailed down. You mentioned the defense. I think the defense is going to be fine. They certainly have the talent. You also have Manny Diaz, who has a defensive background. It's just a matter of getting it together.
Right.
It's clear that this season, the offense and defense are not going to pair at the same time, and they're not going to mesh. And that's fine. I just tell my team, let's win 17-13. Let's slug it out. Let's make it ugly. Let's make it boring. Who cares? Let's cause some turnovers. You have the best linebackers in the conference. Use that to your advantage. So I think it'll be fine, and we'll talk about them next week. But those are some things I would look forward to if I'm Miami.
So you want them to take the Willie Taggart approach?
Well, except for this year, Florida State has the offense, not making it look so boring. Last year, they certainly did because their offensive line couldn't block a duck.
Right. I'm no arguments there, but those really ugly close wins, and
right.
Those, it's okay to throw an interception here because we're gonna rebound and all of that. And
sure.
I mean, it's never okay to throw an interception, but you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah, you take your chances when you can, and that's maybe what Miami has to do. Just to even get to a bowl, they're gonna be tough, but their schedule helps them out a little bit there. So.
Right. And I'd also like to point out for any Miami fans who are concerned about Diaz, I think that he was left in much better circumstances under, Rick than Florida State, what Willie inherited at Florida State from Jimbo. I just think that the players in Miami are a little bit more stubborn and hard-headed, and they might be having a hard time making the transition to the DS system. I don't think there's much cause for concern. I think, like we've said, under Mullen and Taggart, I think once he gets more of his recruits in there, you'll see a lot of improvement.
So FIU has the week off. They do recover from the La Tech loss on the road. And, just get some things hammered down, cool down your team, say, hey, there's plenty to play for, got a lot of season left in front of you. You have a pretty easy opponent coming up, which we'll talk about momentarily. So just kind of getting them back into rhythm is kind of the key in this bye week. Didn't want to talk about UCF, the Knights from Orlando. They do host UConn, and man, was this ugly quick. I did expect this to be kind of an epic beatdown, and I was not wrong. I think at one point UCF had a 48-0 lead, and they were up 28-0 by the end of the first half. Fans were actually leaving the game in the first quarter. That's how bad this game was. UConn is just far and away one of the worst Division I teams, and you kind of look at this team and you feel sorry for them. They just didn't have energy. They couldn't come out of the locker room very happy to be there. Kind of knew what was happening. They did show some life when they had some drives where they actually scored, but just didn't have the athletes. Just didn't have the coaching to be in a game like this. Gabe Davis scores 3 touchdowns through the air. If you're taking out all of the garbage time, UConn doesn't score. Yeah, they did score 21 points, but it was after all the subs were in. They were scoreless at halftime. You bring in at least second string, and I think they did start to finally score, I'm not kidding, on the third and fourth string players. That's when they finally started to score. And you have Daryl Mack, who comes back off of injury. He hasn't played yet this season. He plays the entire second half. Brandon Wimbush, the transfer from Notre Dame, doesn't even play it down in this game, and I think this is 3 in a row. But interestingly enough, did have some reps with the wide receivers. So look for that wrinkle in the offense going forward. That should be interesting. We all know he's probably not an NFL quarterback, and that's fine. He's a really good rusher, but not a great passer. He couldn't even get that done against FAMU. So, it is what it is.
Well, and even when he was at Notre Dame, I still wouldn't say he was that great at passing.
No, yeah. So, he threw 2 picks against Florida State last year, and that was one of the worst teams they played all year. So, not so great. Dylan Gabriel is clearly their quarterback the rest of the year. The only question you had coming into this game was whether or not they would start him and play him, because it would have been his 5th game and he'd lose his redshirt chance. They think he's the future of UCF, and I probably agree if you're going to air it out. So, might as well stick with him. He had 3 touchdowns again, all to Gabe Davis, 11 of 16 for 281 yards, and that was all in 2 quarters of play. So, the only thing I saw about UCF to improve upon was the rushing attack was not as good as anticipated. And you got to get Otis Anderson going. Killens did have like a 75-yard rush where he broke free. Taking out that one play, they kind of struggled. And now, I don't know if this is a pattern or not, UCF did struggle to run against Pitt as well. And that's what caused them to have to throw a lot to stay in that game. So that, and UCF did go 0 for 3 of third downs. Not that any of these were crucial junctions of the game. But just a couple of things to clean up. You will have a better opponent next week, so you have to make sure you iron those things out.
I agree with all of those statements. When we were discussing the game, I brought up the fact that it's good that Heupel was able to get those third and fourth string players out there to get some experience under their belts. And even though it was a high-scoring game, he was really responsible about using his players. He didn't run up the score too much, which I know a lot of the UCF fans are actually disappointed in. Sure. But I think it was a good call because he avoided potential injury in doing that. You know, you're getting experience in your future players, current, but future starters. You're getting some rest for the players who are going to come in real handy for the rest of season because, I mean, you still have a long way to go there too. It was just really smart playmaking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And you can't burn bridges here. You can't justify walking over to shake Edsall's hand in this game to say, oh, hey, I just ran up score because I could. Because then you risk like a Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh situation where you just ticked off at each other. And Unfortunately, the fans don't have the maturity to see that. You know, they're booing late when there's penalties. They're pouting when there's a late fumble and UConn scores a meaningless touchdown. Oh my goodness, so that you don't cover the spread. You only win by 35 instead of 42. Who really cares? And it's sad that UCF's gotten to this point because at the same game, they were honoring the 40th anniversary of the first football team in UCF history. And just give you a glimpse, Lynn, of where this team came from. When this university was founded, they said, we don't want athletics. We want to focus on the Space Coast and engineering. So they finally gave in and they had sports, and the first football team didn't have a locker room. The players had to bring their own cleats. They did play at the Citrus Bowl, but most of their games were away. The first season, they only played 8 games. Their coaching staff, Lynn, did it for free. It was all a voluntary effort. They took 0 salary.
Right.
This kind of stuff is unheard of now. This is just not a way you start a program. To see, and they were D3, by the way, to work all the way up to where they are now. And it just saddens me to see the fans, and I know I'm not talking about every fan here. I get there's just some select fans that are just going to sit back, cross their arms, and not cheer when you win 56-21. And that's not every UCF fan. It's certainly not our family. We're season ticket holders. But, you know, let's put some perspective into this. These guys are 18 and 22 years old. They're playing their hearts out. You can't just continue to blow out teams that just aren't good and expect people not to hate you. So you have to balance, do I want to be respected or do I want to be hated? And I think right now UCF's in the respect range, so let's keep it going.
Well, and you also have to think, they've had, and this is by no means a diss on UCF or the program, they've made great strides. They've had great coaching staff to come in and really develop these players. The last, 2-3 seasons, they've been able to spread the talent in games like this UConn game, you know, where everybody's getting the opportunity to play. They're able to rest the players who are going to help, you know, cannonball the rest of the season. But 4 years ago, they lost every single game.
Yep.
So the fact that the fan base has turned so quickly is just astonishing to me. Like, I hate to say it because I am not one of these fans, but in the sense of, you know, Florida State and the rough seasons that we've been having, are we spoiled to want the wins? Yes. But at the same time, we've had 40 years of this history since all of our down seasons. So the fact that these fans who've had 4 years are already acting like that versus, you know, a big dynasty school like Florida State, it's mind-blowing to me. And it's, like I said, it's not a diss at either program by any means, but it's odd to think about and see what's going on there when there are so many great things happening on that football field for UCF still.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And hopefully they'll get some more success, and that's what this is all designed to do, is to build it continually. And yeah, I mean, here's to the next 40 years of UCF being good.
100%.
But, you know, until then, you know, just a message to the fans, you know, we're not upset. Just know that other programs have been through this, and it cycles through. So just be ready. All right. Well, that wraps up the Knights. They win comfortably at home. And let's go and move on to the last 2 Florida teams in action. The South Florida Bulls, what can I say? It just keeps getting worse for these guys. They lose at home to SMU. SMU, by the way, very good team. They're undefeated so far this year. One of only two in the American, as it turns out. And
Brandon?
Yeah.
Do you know how well this SMU team is doing this year?
Tell me.
They are in the top 25 for the first time since receiving the death penalty.
No kidding. I didn't realize it had been that long.
It's been 31, 32 years.
That's a long time. I didn't realize it had been... Wow. I keep trying to recommend this. If the fans have not seen the Pony Excess, which is a documentary about the SMU death penalty, it is probably the best one in college football. I would challenge that ESPN's challenging that status with the overall arching 150-year thing that they're running this year, which is really good too. But yeah, SMU really did themselves a favor by getting Shane Buechele, a transfer out of Texas. I mean, he's 21 out of 25 in this game, 3 touchdowns, and they were up, I think, 38-0 at one point. And if I'm South Florida and I'm Charlie Strong, okay, you are what you are. I also have to give Charlie. I've been kind of hard on him, not gonna lie. Last year I thought he was gonna get hired away to Kansas, and now I'm like, oh, bro, you have lost like 10 of your last 11 games, kind of deal. But it's to me. Go ahead.
I have to question: has Charlie Strong given up?
It's a valid question, but I also ask myself, you're only in year 3. I don't know what the contract situation is there, and you just can't seem to find answers. You thought by going to McLeod in this game he'd be the response, but he goes 8 of 19 for 2 interceptions. So then you put back in Barnett. He comes out on fire and does decently, 13 of 21, 3 TDs, but they were all very late when the game was out of hand. But rushing, your leading rusher had 30 yards?
Right.
This is just not okay. You just can't get up 4 of 16 on third downs. You passed for 288. Most of that one time didn't matter. And 54 total rushing yards. 10 sacks allowed. This is just not a team that cares or has energy. And, I struggle to see where this team win 4 games.
I agree. And the fact that your defense allowed close to 500 yards from SMU, what's happened?
Yeah. It's hard for me to say.
I only have questions when I look at this USF team, especially having gone to the USF game last season. I feel like something completely deflated them after that game, and it's not just Charlie Strong. I have to ask, who on this team has any hope and wants to do good?
Yeah. And, I mean, it's one thing if, you're putting guys in the NFL and you have the talent there, but, I mean, yes, they grabbed all the recruits from Florida, which is a great state to recruit from. That's a great plan. But to see that you're getting everybody's leftovers, that's not necessarily a good sign, apparently. And I love Charlie Strong. I mean, he was at UF, so he has a pedigree. He was at Louisville, great coach there. Something's different, and it's hard to figure it out. The 2017 season, I start to look at that now, and I used to think, yeah, Charlie Strong, he still got it. He wins 11 games in a bowl. I'm like, he actually took Taggart's players and did that. And then once that talent graduated, moved on, transferred, whatever, he wins his first 7 games, and since then, he lost, I think, 8 in a row, and like I said, 10 of the last 11. So it's kind of sad, but I really do hope the best and wish that this turns around for him, especially in the American, which is a good conference. There's a lot of parity in the American. You can have a bad season, next year you win 7 or 8 games pretty easily, with SMU showing that right now. So let's just hope that happens, but right now it's a big struggle for the Bulls. Really big.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I know that a lot of the Bulls fans have been wanting Charlie Strong to leave. There's a part of me that questions whether or not they let him go before the end of season.
And that's what Chris has been saying, and that was a joke. So, hey, Citizen, when exactly is Charlie Strong going to be let go? And because you're the American and Charlie Strong is maybe one of the best options you have, I don't know that they will, but I also just don't see a lot of reason to keep him. But yeah, tough loss at home. SMU charges on. SMU might be questionably the favorite coming out of that division, and heck, they may be the one to knock off Memphis and actually play UCF in the title game. We'll see.
That would be a fun change. I know that UCF is kind of getting bored with Memphis right now. Loving the rivalry, but getting bored with the games. So.
Yeah, it's good for the conference for Memphis to continue that and to keep UCF on the radar because that's what everyone comes to expect, and that's only a recent thing over the last 3 seasons. But,
right.
Yeah, welcome change for everyone else for sure. So, all right, and then the last game, moving on, will be the FAU Owls. The Lane train goes on the road to Charlotte, and they get a victory, 45-27. They beat them pretty well. Some of my takeaways from this game, I predicted Charlotte to win, so obviously I was wrong there. But mostly because Benny LeMay and their quarterback, Reynolds, had just really been going off on the rushing attack. And FAU said, "Not today, my friend," and they stopped it. So they couldn't get going. They were down early. They continued to show presence in the backfield. And when FAU had the ball, yeah, they had some penalties here and there, but they scored when it mattered. So they do indeed get the win, a conference win, and not always the case. They actually lost to Charlotte last year. It's a little revenge in this one, too.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see. And looking at how FAU's done this season, their 2 losses have come to top 20 teams. And I think that people need to start paying more attention to what's going on down in Boca Raton because I think we've got a sleeper team on our hands. Don't agree with a lot with Lane Kiffin, but I think that the coaching staff that he's surrounded himself with is really talented, and I think that they're truly developing these players to advancing careers, whether it's on the field or off in the sports of football. So.
Yes, and I think if I am Robeson, the quarterback, and I'm Lane Kiffin, I say I'm going to feed Harrison Bryant the rest of the year because he is definitely a tight end NFL in the making, for the NFL in the making. And it's going to really show because early on when they couldn't find McCammon or knew who their running back was, you're throwing your tight end 6 to 8 passes a game, which is probably double what you'd normally kind of throw him. And I appreciate that they continue to feed him, but then like all of a sudden their backup tight end starts getting catches. So I'm like, are they not as confident in the rushing attack? Hard to say. I think now they're really saying, yeah, we can do both. And so that's going to complement each other really well. They can control the clock. They can get the check down. Not going to be a lot of explosive plays, but when you're in Conference USA, you probably don't need too many. So my preseason pick of FIU is looking pretty weak compared to how FIU is progressing and moving forward. But still happy for the Owls to get the W.
I wholeheartedly agree.
All right. Man, well, what a week. Any final thoughts on any team finishing up this week before we move on to next week's predictions and previews?
None that I can think of. I think we've got a pretty good cover going here. Yeah,
I agree. So, going to go ahead and start off moving into week 7. Like you said, hard to believe. Most team seasons will be hitting the halfway point in the next week or two, depending on if they're on a bye. And Florida has quite the task ahead of them. Florida hosts Auburn at home. Now, the good news is Auburn comes to Gainesville. But the Gators are going to have a very big challenge here. Some of the things that the Gators really need to be careful of, they need to figure out the O-line, especially in the run game. Is it Pierce or is it P. Ryan? I think probably Pierce is better than P. Ryan, but is that who you're going to go with? Are you going to run your quarterback? How often, if ever, are you going to bring in Emory Jones? Trask early on seems to be holding on to the ball too long. You just can't do that against SEC defensive lines like Auburn. On the other side of the ball, Auburn's offensive line is clicking. Their running game, a mobile quarterback with Bo Nix, and the trick plays should scare you if you're the Gators. And that's weird to say, coming from like a Todd Grantham defense and the Gators, who are very, very disciplined. But they will catch you when you're napping. And I saw what they did to Mississippi State. I saw what they did to Texas A&M. I think the Gators should be very worried here. This game could have got out of hand quickly. Now, I don't think it will. I'm just saying it could. But it's clear that Auburn is going to win the lines of scrimmage. It's going to be the best the Gators have faced all season. I personally think Auburn wins this game by 10, maybe 13 points.
See, and that's where you and I differ, and I know that I'm being a horrible Florida State fan right now, but I think that Florida, with the home field advantage and knowing how intimidating Ben Hill Griffin Stadium is, I think it's going to be a close game. I know that the line right now is Auburn by 3. I think Florida's going to squeak through and win by 1. Don't ask me what I think the final score is going to be, because I haven't thought that too far in advance, but I think it's going to be Florida by 1.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that take. They certainly have home field, and Auburn is they're just not going to get over on Florida's defense like they do everybody else's. I know that for a fact.
I agree.
You got game day there. I've lamented this earlier. I'm just kind of jealous and in awe of the Florida Auburn games. They never disappoint. And I feel like that happens here. But respectfully, I do think Auburn wins this by 2 scores. So I think there are plenty of ways Florida can win. Keeping it close, Trask cleaning up some stuff. It's clear that Mullen likes to go for it on 4th down. If you decide not to, you have one of the best kickers in the country in McPherson. So you almost surely got 3 points. They control the ball really well. There are some time. Maybe Trask may throw an interception or maybe a crazy fumble here or there. But, I would not be surprised if Florida pulls this off. I'm still going to take Auburn, though.
I will take that bet with you.
All right. Certainly be fun. Florida State will definitely not lose because they have a bye week. What are some things the Noles should work on as they have the week off?
I think we need to keep an eye on the quarterback competition that I think is developing, whether Taggart wants to admit it or not. I know that Blackman's coming off of an injury, so the additional rest from this past week going into the bye is going to be helpful. I think Hornibrook is a really good contender moving forward also. So I think we need to keep an eye on the quarterback play coming out of this bye week. I think that we still have a long way to go with our O-line, so I want to see more discipline coming out of this bye week, and just the tweaks that Jim Lovett has brought in the last 3 or 4 weeks since he was hired as a special assistant for our defense. I think that he's moving us in the right direction. I want to see him continue to help our defense with additional tweaks. I'd like to see more effort with the zone coverage, but I think we still have a lot of eyes on the offense right now in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, perfect. I think the only thing I would add is I'm very curious to see if Taggart tries to sell out and beat Clemson, knowing that they're a little bit down. I'm a Noles fan for life, and I'm going to say he should not do that. I
agree. I'm still taking this as one of our guaranteed losses of the season.
Yeah, me too. Take the loss. I think that you're better off just saying, here's our plan. If it works, we beat them. Then they weren't a better team, and that's fine. Obviously, I want to beat Clemson, but I just expect the loss as well. And if you don't win, then you tell yourself, we have a good Wake Forest team coming up. I'm looking very far ahead here. You got a good Wake Forest team. You got to play. You have Syracuse. Then you can win those in the menial games. You can win at least 3 or 4 of those. And if you sell out too much against Clemson and you get down, then you revert back. But anyway, in the bye week, I just tell my team to keep doing all the things you've been doing. Keep being who you are. Play to your strengths. If it happens, it happens. But that's what I tell the team in the bye week.
Oh, I agree. Plus, we're playing at Clemson. Death Valley is never an easy game, especially for Florida State. So, like I said earlier, as long as I keep seeing improvement week over week with this team, I'm happy. So I agree. I think that we should create a plan. We should stick to it. We shouldn't overplay anybody because we're also known for getting a lot of injuries at Clemson. Um,
Hmm.
so let's be really liberal with our playing. I think we should keep our heads up, but I don't think we look at this going in for the win at all.
All right. That's a good point about the injuries. I didn't think about that. All right. So, FSU heading into the bye week. The Miami Hurricanes, coming off of a bye, they get to host Virginia Tech. What are your thoughts on this game, Lynn?
I hate to say it, I got to give it to Virginia Tech. Unless Manny Diaz worked a miracle over the last week or so, I think that Virginia Tech's going to come out the stronger team. Miami has a hard time getting the crowd involved at home unless they're playing somebody big like Florida or Florida State. So, they're down on their luck. I think they really need the fan support, and they're just not going to get it at home. I got to give it to Vatek.
Oh, taking the Hokies to bounce back after a loss to Duke. I'm actually going to take the opposite side here and disagree. I think that Miami rebounds and actually wins another game here. Yes, they're not a great team. They have offensive line struggles. Williams, I think, probably is the best option at quarterback, and I think it's only a matter of time before Dallas gets unleashed at running back. Plus, the defense is going to stop Virginia Tech, who's clearly inept. In my opinion, it's a battle between Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech as the worst team in the conference. So I'm going to take the Canes here at home.
We'll see.
Yeah, we will. But let's not sugarcoat this. These are two bad teams going at it, right? These are both in the bottom rung of the ACC this year.
Which is shocking because traditionally these two teams are playing for the top of the division.
Yeah, you would have thought actually, and there's a lot of writers, to pick Miami to be the team to win the Coastal. I was always on Virginia, and I'm looking pretty smart for that, but that could have fallen apart as well. It's just the Canes, just too much transition. So okay, we differ on that, but that's fine. They're both pretty weak. We'll see who comes out on top of that one. Let's see. UCF goes on the road, playing a Friday night game on ESPN against the Cincinnati Bearcats. Currently a 3-point favorite. I love this matchup, and if I'm the American, this is one of your top 3 games of the year. That's the way I see it. If UCF had played some better competition on the other side of the division, like if they had played Memphis in the regular season, which they don't this year, if Houston had De'Aaron King, which they no longer do, that would have been a good one. But you got to look at this one and say, this is our crown jewel. This is one of the matchups we want the nation to see. It's going to be close, and they're very good teams, and they're not wrong. Cincinnati does have a win against UCLA. Take that as you will. I don't even know how good UCLA is, whatever. Cincinnati loses to Ohio State. Who hasn't? So, with Ritter down with injury, this makes Cincinnati look a very different team. And, we already seen UCF struggle on the road. I'm not saying that Pittsburgh is the end-all be-all of how UCF is going to be away from home this year. I'm just saying, you are a different team. Everyone is when you're not in the confines of your own home stadium. I think overall, because of the passing game, you have so many wrinkles in offense. You flat out know UCF's going to score 30 points. I'm still going to take the Knights here to win on the road.
I agree. I'm gonna take UCF by 3. I think it will be close for all of the reasons that you pointed out, and I'm shocked that since he's doing as well as they are and are as strong as they are, coming into the turn of season here at the midway point. So I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think it's going to be an entertaining game, and I think UCF's gonna keep that lead by 3.
All right, sounds good. We're already disagreeing more than you and I, than Chris and I do. So good for us. It's actually a good thing. I heard some feedback that you guys agree too much, and I'm like, we are what we are. But now, I like this.
Also take this all with a grain of salt. We do a weekly pick'em, and I'm usually dead last in it. So I have my theories, and I'm always proven wrong. But I'd rather take the underdog sometimes, or pick pick against you just for the heck of it. So I'm happy to pick some different sides for you for once.
You do that, but then you also have those weeks where you're 9-1. So I'm like, I don't know. So there's other weeks you're spot on. Other weeks it's a struggle, but fun nonetheless for sure. All right, so let's see here. That covers Miami, UCF, FIU. And they're going to be playing UMass. Does the name Walt Bell ring a bell to you, Lynn?
Oh, Lord.
You know he's the head coach of UMass, right?
He is, and everybody was really excited when he took that position, so we didn't have to buy him out of his contract at Florida State. I would like to thank him for opening up an opportunity for Kendall Briles to come to Florida State. I wish him more luck than I do Jimbo Fisher, but I think he takes on more than he can chew sometimes. I think that was proven at Florida State, and I think that that's also being proven at UMass.
Yes, and, this is a downgrade from being an OC at a major Division I program. I think that's pretty obvious. And UMass, he has a long ways to go, and as much as FIU has struggled, I think FIU does pretty easily win this game. And last week, Akron played UMass, and there were so many jokes about these are like the worst two D1 programs going at it.
Hey, now, I have a lot of respect for the Zips.
Well, they lost to UMass, so I don't know what that means, but I can respect them still. I get that.
I have to agree with you on this one. I think of the two teams facing off, I think FIU is going to pull this one out. I think it'll give FIU some confidence that it greatly needs.
Yeah,
which is sad because it's UMass. I think that this will help FIU kind of get over the little hump that they're on. It would put them on a 2-game win streak. I'm not saying it'll change their season around. I think it'll just help them make a step towards something that they're lacking.
Yeah, I don't know they're going to cover the 4-touchdown spread here, but I like Morgan to come back. And
that's cute.
Yeah, I think that the Panthers finally have some things going on the offensive side, so I take them comfortable, but not by 28. So,
agreed.
There is that. The Florida Atlantic Owls are on a bye, and we have the pillow fight matchup of the year. South Florida takes on UConn, the two worst teams in the American. If it weren't for the American name, no one would watch this game. No one may watch it anyway. The Bulls, coming off of one victory this season. UConn, coming off of one victory this season. Who prevails in this featherweight title? This is going to be bad.
This is going to be so bad. And I'm going to get stoned by all of my Bull friends. I have to give the pillow fight victory to UConn.
Jeez.
I know.
Wow. So here's my take on this. These teams are both really bad, but I think UConn is so bad they lose this game too. And I think Charlie Strong knows he has to win at least 4 games this year to have any kind of respect, and I think he shows up for this one. So I'm actually going to take the Bulls to win this game. And you know what? Both teams may actually look pretty good. It's a flash in the pan, people, okay? They may actually score 24. It's not because their offense is that good. It's because UConn is that bad. Trust me. UConn, at this point, is an embarrassment to Division I because they only squeaked out a 3-point victory against Wagner. This is going south quick, and it has been for years with Randy Edsall. I cannot believe the amount of lack of success they have had. And you go independent all you want. Everyone's going to schedule you because everyone knows they can beat the snot out of you. Go right ahead. But I'm going to take the Bulls to win.
Listen, I have respect for basketball. This will make sense in a second. I have a lot of respect for basketball. It is not my favorite sport. I would much rather watch UConn versus USF in basketball than watch this football game.
Yeah. It's just not going to be fun.
It's going to be rough.
And how the heck did this game get the No, okay, they moved it to 12 o'clock. At one point, there was talk about moving this to night game, so I'm glad they changed their mind on that. But my goodness, this is not good for the conference. I mean, this brings down the American to have a matchup like this where you're forced to play this type of game. And so, I hope that these programs turn around eventually, but it's not going to be fun this year.
I agree. And maybe they were trying to give Alabama a run for their money. Let's have USF and UConn play the 7 o'clock time slot. It'll give people a break from watching a whole bunch of red and white run across the field.
Well, I think they failed on that one, but good luck to one of these programs getting their second win of the year, and it may be, I don't know, I would not be surprised if it's the last win of the season for one of these two teams.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, what a week recap. You got a lot of teams coming up. Any final thoughts on any of these matchups going forward into next week, Lynn?
I know that Florida State's going into the bye, but I did see right before we started recording that the Clemson game is still undecided for a time, but they've narrowed it down to either 3:30 or 7. I think that Florida State will probably put on, this is going to sound weird, I think Florida State would put on a better show at the 3:30 game with all of the criteria we put ahead earlier in the conversation. I think if it's a 7 o'clock game, I think that's when Clemson truly flourishes. So I think 3:30 would actually work in Florida State's favor just a little bit. It's the heat of the day, and Florida State has gotten used to playing in the heat, even when we're hydrated or dehydrated. So I think the earlier the better in terms of Florida State's play. I think if they choose the 7 o'clock spot, Clemson's just going to run all over that field. But what's new? But I think that we've brought up some pretty good points today, and I know that we'll put aside our differences to say even the pillow fight will be a good game next week.
Indeed. And more to come on all the other matchups following week. But thank you, Lynn, for taking the time to add in that, since as the fans are used to hearing, Chris will be back next week to continue our usual Florida State-Florida rivalry, takes on the game. So thank you, Lynn, for coming on this week. A couple of notes to our fans and community. www.floridafocuspodcast.com. That's how you can reach out to us. A couple of reasons you should reach out. We would love some feedback. I don't care if it's a review, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. Tell us how we're doing well or how we can improve. We have a season-long contest going on. We would love for you to send an audio clip. What is your favorite in-game experience as a fan? We're giving away a pretty big prize. I will announce it within the next 2 weeks. I promise what that is. And if you have thoughts and suggestions on, oh man, Lynn knocked it out of the park, as she always does with her takes on these teams. Brandon, you're crazy. How do you guys still support Willie Taggart? Why in the world do you think UConn would win? How could you pick Auburn on the road? However that feedback wants to come in, we'd love to hear it. So, given all that stuff, Lynn, any final thoughts before we sign off for the night?
None that I can think of.
All right. Well, we do appreciate the listen. Thank you for the time you give us every week. We really do appreciate it. My name is Brandon, and I want to thank you by saying, Go Noles.
Go Noles.